Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and we have a great show for you this evening. We have Paul Carr as a guest. He is involved in the space field. He's a healthy skeptic, and he's also he's involved in the Aerial Phenomenon Investigations Team, API. We're going to be talking all about that later. Alejandro Rojas is coming up in just a minute with UFO Updates. Just a couple of things. I want to thank everyone that supports the show. Without your support, we could not do it. I really do appreciate that. Every week, we have a new blog by Charles Lear, who blogs for us. And this week, the blog is titled Sympathy for the Air Force Regarding UFOs. Maybe a lot of people don't have sympathy for the Air Force because we know they've actually have not always been truthful. But in this blog, Charles covers the Air Force's means of deflecting the press and the citizenry who hounded them for information right in the midst of the 1950s UFO mania or flap, or whatever that was happening. I would say mania is more to it. Also, I just wanted to let people know that we do have a UFO sightings posting page. Anyone can post there anonymously. Recently, the last posting, the gentleman decided not to remain anonymous, and he is a pilot. His name is Mark Muscat, and he's a commercial pilot with over 5,000 hours, and he writes about his encounter while night flying back in 1998 with a formation of lights, 6 very unusual lights. So check that out. That's over at podcastufo.com under UFO sightings. And that's it for me for right now. We're going to bring on the one and only Alejandro Rojas. How are you, Alejandro?
Hello. I am doing well, thank you.
Good. Welcome to the show. And we're going to have Lou Elizondo on this week. Is he coming up?
Yeah, well, this will be the update. So I didn't have him this week, which was kind of cool in a way, because I thought I really want to catch my audience up. I mean, I've been doing a lot of research in the background over the background of ATIP and how it got together, who are all these major players, and it can be really confusing. And so I decided it would be good to have a show where I just cover that. And so that's what I did. That way because people were asking a lot of questions for Lou that obviously they didn't understand a lot of that background. So I did that because he had to push again. And essentially what happened was he made the commitment that he would do an interview with me before he kind of knew what the schedule was for the History Channel. And plus he didn't realize he had to get permission from the History Channel to do the interview. So we've been working with them, and that's what's been kind of weird. So What's funny, and I'll tell people about that in just a minute, is we've been in contact. So I've been able to get some answers from him on various things that have happened, but and I've shared some with you. So I'm still getting these kind of mini interviews in the background, but our actual interview now cannot happen until the show airs. So as soon as the show airs, May 31st, that weekend, we'll do the interview. And so the essentially show right after the first show of the History Channel's Unidentified will be the Lou Elizondo interview. So
I can understand why they're doing that. I mean, they may not want any little tidbits thrown out there that that would be important to the show itself. So I kind of get why they're doing that. Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because I've written a couple stories we haven't posted on Den of Geek yet. And this podcast, covers a lot of the background. Well, I was able to get a view of the first episode. I'm not sure if I even told you this yet. No. And it is really good. I think people are going to be floored. Karen, my girlfriend, the owner of the UFO Congress, she says it was her favorite UFO show ever.
Wow.
I mean, it's amazing that it's a UFO show where it's very accurate. I saw, I'm well known. I know the background to everything they covered, and it was very accurate. But it goes over, Chris Mellon plays a big role. Steve Justice plays a big role. Elizondo is kind of the main guy. And it goes over their backgrounds. And just to have the high level of credibility that these people have to be doing a show on UFOs and talking about it seriously and conducting serious investigations, I think this show is incredibly important. And I think that all of our UFO buddies are going to love it. Now, the UFO crowd always surprises me. They often are, there's more negativity than I could have ever imagined that happens sometimes. But we'll see what people nitpick. I don't think there's a lot to nitpick. I think there's a lot to be excited about with the show.
Well, that's great. And
Yep.
so you got to see, I think I forget what the screener is what they call them. You get to
Yeah.
see the screener. Are they going to show you other episodes or just that number one? That's it?
I'm not sure. We've actually asked, and they have said that they're not sure. It'll probably just be this first episode before the show airs, so this might be it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that I'll get early looks for all of the shows to prepare reviews early. That doesn't always happen. With Blue Book, they gave us a few episodes, but not all of them.
Yeah.
So we'll see. That's yet to be seen, but this first one is really good. A couple other people have gotten it. I know Ryan Sprague and MJ Benias, and I know they both really, really liked it. MJ is, of course, more critical of things, but he even really liked it. I haven't listened to his full review yet, but
he does
MJ's
great reviews.
Great.
Yeah, I like watching his reviews. He's funny.
Yeah.
So what else is going on?
So a couple of big pieces of news that I want to cover. First, I do want to mention I'm wearing my UFO Congress hat. Use the code
noticed.
SAVE 40, and your listeners can get $40 off ticket packages. So save 40 at ufocongress.com. But the couple of pieces of news. First of all, the guy who's giving us all of the best news and keeping us up to date on what's going on is George Knapp, and he has a new story at KLAS with his buddy Matt Adams, who he does these stories with. But they essentially got a hold of this forum that's called a DD 1910. I think we might have talked about it before. But what this forum does is shows that the DoD did release these three videos, these three FLIR Navy videos. Now, we have to remember, and Leslie Kane has piped up recently, actually, to clarify with people, and I've kind of spoken to this. There has been no doubt in the mainstream as to the veracity of those videos. A lot of UFO nerds like us, I'm certainly a UFO nerd, we care about the details, but most don't. Because right off the bat, the New York Times said they got the videos from the DoD, they were able to vet them and make sure they were real, and they were from the Navy. So boom, for most people, that is good enough. Nick Pope even came in and backed up Leslie Kane and said, because she was like, I don't know why this is even in question, but of course we verified all of this stuff. And Nick Pope says, yes, the New York Times has the highest standards for checking the veracity of the details. They make sure that everything is double-checked, triple-checked to make sure it's all real and accurate. So, but this form is from the DoD. Now, it was leaked. And so when George Knapp posted this story showing, displaying this form, some people, all of us were going to the DoD, hey, verify this. Tell us if this is real or not. Because in the past, the DoD has told John Greenwald we had nothing to do with those videos. And that was essentially what they said. We have nothing to do with those videos. They got back to John Greenwald first, and it's kind of funny that and I knew it, they always get to John Greenwald first. And John is, of course, you've had him on the show, more skeptical about things. And so he posted that this forum did not really show that the DoD had released the videos. And to be honest, I'm not even completely sure. Some people, I will put it this way. I wrote a story to kind of clarify, to go over every point and every little aspect of that document so we can talk about the different parts of it and why the DoD had said what they said. They said the form is real, which verifies these are real DoD videos, and which also counters what they had said before, that they have nothing to do with it. They certainly did have nothing to do with it, or something to do with it. They released them. At the end of their comment to John Greenwald, though, they did comment that these were not approved for general public release.
Yeah, I saw that.
And that's actually completely inaccurate. This form is a form for public release. It was approved by the Navy. The name of the person in the Navy is withheld. It's redacted, but there is a section that shows it is someone from the Navy who was asked, and boom, there's a stamp of approval. It was approved for public release. Now, in the comments, the person who requested that the videos be released, and we don't know who this person is as of yet. Apparently, Elizondo does know, but he can't share that information yet. But the person said that they were going to share this with, USG governmental agencies and also with industry partners for their databases so we can all kind of figure out what this is. Almost like a crowdfunding sort of thing. Nowhere on there did it say that these databases could not be public facing. And, the way it was written to me sounds like they wanted to kind of crowdsource, get this out to people and see what people think. So certainly To the Stars would be an industry partner, and nothing is barring them from sharing it to the public. That's what this was for, a public release. So it does not bar anybody from general public release. Now, it does have a sentence in there that said this is not for publication. We are not intending to publicize or to for publication, to publish these videos. A publication would be a journal, a book, a New York Times story. So this DOD form did not approve the videos for release in that fashion, but that's not what the writer was seeking in the first place. Now, the New York Times did publish them, but the New York Times is not telling us, where they got the videos. They're just saying they got them from the DOD. They were vetted. They were able to publish them. So what their process was to get those videos published, we don't know. But at least this form does confirm, and the DOD does confirm these videos are theirs. So there's a lot of confusion around that piece. But the big story, which a lot of people are like, why are we even debating any of this other stuff? The big story is the DOD is confirming they did release these videos. These videos are real. They are from the Navy. They are from Navy F-18 jets, something that really the mainstream has not even questioned since the New York Times told us all of that. But at least it verifies that all in the background. So I do have on openminds.tv a link to George Knapp's story. It's the first one. And then a link to my story with some clarifications. And I do link to John Greenwald. So if you want to go look at John Greenwald and see what he has to say and his interpretation, I've got links to all of that in there as well. So you can go see what you think yourself.
Now, why do you suppose that the person in the Pentagon would say not for a public release in an email? That's bizarre, isn't it?
Not really, I don't think. I think that it's been obvious to me. Now, this is me speculating, but it's also me having this is educated speculation. We've seen this before. The DOD are all of these military public relations departments. They obviously their first thought is, how do we make us look good? The second part is, can I even get access to this information? A lot of times they don't. They're not able to get access. In fact, Leslie Kean made a comment. The reason the DOD is probably wrong so much on this is that they don't have access. It's such a small program that is, tucked away in the Pentagon here, that they probably have a hard time finding any information. She's like, I've got experience with FOIA, and she's ran into the same issues where they just don't know where to look, so they can't find the information. And that's probably related to what's going on. And this happens all the time. Nearly every major UFO case, the military tells us something, and then they correct themselves later. I mean, this was done in Stephenville. This was done with the O'Hare incident. It's done practically every time. So is it a surprise that here again, we have a big UFO case where they gave us wrong information at first and then corrected it later on? It's not that surprising. What is a little bit of surprising is they're kind of blatantly spinning, in my opinion. They either are embarrassed or kind of frustrated by this whole situation, and you can't blame them. Lou did not, Elizondo did not say, hey guys, I'm going to retire and then I'm going to tell everybody about this UFO project that I'm working on. He did not clear this with the press department, so they're probably very frustrated with Lou that he would go out there and do this, which puts them in an odd position because now they have to answer all these questions about UFO stuff, which they haven't been. They haven't been really talking to anybody but John Greenwald. He's the only one they're talking to on a regular basis. The rest of us, they're ignoring, or they say they're going to come back with a response, and they don't. So I think that's what it is. They're embarrassed that they're proving themselves wrong, and so they're just trying to save face, and at the same time, they're not doing a very good job of it. They're making themselves look bad. And we just, these are not often professional PR people. These are often people who take PR duty, seriously. I mean, they're not professionals who are looking to get into the media to do this as a profession. So they're just tasked with having to do this. And if anybody's called them, you kind of get that sense there's a vast difference between talking to publicists and talking to the PR guys for the military. So I think all of this has to be all in play here, and we've experienced this over and over again in the past, dealing with them. I mean, they are not the best source of the most accurate information. That's why you need the documents, and that's what's great that people are pursuing to get these documents. It's great that John verified that this document that George Knapp got was real. In fact, they verified it with Greenwald before they did with Knapp for some reason, even though Knapp is an award-winning investigative journalist. I mean, that's more evidence that they're kind of playing games over there and who they're talking to and what information that they're giving people.
Yeah, maybe that because John has like 2 million FOIA documents that he's got.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're out of time. Did you have anything else you wanted to say real quickly? Yeah.
The only other thing that I wanted to say out there is that the other big story is that the Navy had said they're not going to share any UFO information they receive. Well, here's another thing where I've gotten some information from Lou Elizondo. In George Knapp's story that I referred to earlier, he interviews Chris Mellon, and Chris Mellon actually gives him a statement on how To the Stars was integral in getting the Navy to create these UFO guidelines. And Lou is saying, when I asked him that, hey, the Navy said that they're not going to release the data, but that's not the full story. We've been working behind the scenes. We know the Navy's not going to release their raw data to the public, but that information will be given to Congress. It will be given to their leadership, and then that information will be taken and summarized for the public. So we will see information about what the Navy is collecting on UFOs. The example he gave was North Korea and their nukes. We don't know details about where their nukes are, what they're, everything that's been retrieved that way with the data. But we do get public information about summaries of their nuclear program. And that's the sort of thing we will get information. So that's not completely accurate, all these headlines, that the Navy's going to keep it all secret.
Excellent. All right, Alejandro, thanks so much.
Yep, my pleasure. Thanks.
All right, I'll talk to you next week. Thank you.
Talk to you later.
All right, everyone. So our guest is Paul Carr, and he's had a lifelong fascination with the exploration of outer space and all things unexplained. And let's see, he has been a spacecraft systems engineer, a career that now spans about 38 years. And he, while working at the Applied Physics Lab in Maryland, he earned his MS in Applied Physics from Johns Hopkins. And in 2011, he was recruited to join the Aerial Phenomena Investigations Team, API. We'll be talking about that. And back in 2017, he took over as director of that. And this is an independent organization that investigates UFOs worldwide. So welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Martin, for having me on.
Thank you. And, I was looking, it was back 4 years ago. A lot's changed in the 4 years that's when you were on last time.
Yes, it has.
Yeah. And back then we were doing the 1 hour shows. Now we got 2 hours, and we're on a great radio station and all kinds of good stuff here. But anyway, thank you. And I want to say that we do have a lot of new listeners to the show. There's new listeners every week. I get email. It's really amazing how, I would say, within the last year, how many people are listening now to the show. Can you give them, for the person that didn't listen 4 years ago, please give your background, if you would, and what got you interested in UFOs?
Well, as you mentioned, I've been involved in the space field for since I got out of college, and I was a Sputnik baby, born in 1958.
Yep.
Right a few months after Sputnik. So there was this big panic on about, oh my gosh, we have to catch up on science and engineering, and so there was that big push to get all us little kids into space and into science. And I was totally right there with that whole program. And I was 11 years old when Neil Armstrong set his foot on the moon, and I was really jealous of Neil Armstrong. I wanted to be him. And I I even fantasized about stowing away on the capsule.
That wouldn't
just
go
had
over
no-
well. Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, I couldn't think of a good plan. Anyway, and when I was at that, of course, also in the '60s, what was going on was a lot of UFO stuff around, a lot of books that were available at any public library, or it wasn't all stuck away in the new age section of the bookstore, and so I had a lot of exposure to that. I didn't think a great deal of it until I was a little older. I started reading some books. I actually to join NICAP, you had to have $5 for the membership fee, and I started saving. Which, by the way, $5 for a 10-year-old kid in 1968 was a lot of money.
It was. I remember. Yeah.
And so I started putting my pennies and stuff in a box, and I was going to join NICAP. And I can't remember what happened to that plan, but I don't remember ever getting one of their newsletters. I think they folded around that time. But because I was really interested in what I was reading. Now, a lot of that was just sort of the pulp press, and just books I could find in the library. And but when I was a teenager, my dad and I were out walking one night, probably about, I think, 1971, something like that. And I had my first sighting. These were lights, but there were a lot of lights, and they were highly brightly colored lights that were dancing around each other and moving very fast. And my dad saw it too, although we didn't speak of it after that.
Really? Wow.
Which I think is pretty common in a lot of families.
I do hear that.
Hey, Dad, remember the time we saw the UFOs? No. Because, it was kind of upsetting to his worldview and a bit to mine as well. I was already an aspiring scientist and engineer. And now I didn't see another UFO again for many, many years, but I was interested. I went off and got my degree in science, and I was thinking, well, maybe this can all be explained, and I don't really have time to deal with it. And it wasn't until much later, in the 90s, that my interest revived again, and I did have a rather unusual experience again with nocturnal lights that I still can't fully explain. I suppose it could have been a hoax, but it would have been a very elaborate one. And so I was puzzled by that. I still am puzzled by that experience. And I started thinking about it quite a lot and started researching online. I was involved in some of the bulletin board stuff in the early days, the CompuServe. And
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Many of your listeners probably aren't old enough to remember CompuServe, but
Alta Vista. The Alta Vista years. Yeah.
Yeah, I got into that. I was a little bit disappointed in the culture, and I was witness to a lot of the disinformation that was flying around back then. Most people weren't suckered in by it, but and then this went on for a very long time. And as you mentioned earlier, my interest would wax and wane with other things going on. I had a family, I had other things to deal with, and in 2011, just as my kids stopped being so little, I was contacted to join API, and I thought, well, this is what I want to do. I want to get out there and talk to people who've seen UFOs. I don't want to read about it online anymore so much. I want to actually go talk to these people. And are they crazy? Are they rednecks, ignorant? What kind of people are they? And really, try to understand their experiences, understand my experience in terms of theirs. And in the meantime, I'd had another couple of experiences. Again, one was I would consider a close encounter, and which puzzles me to this day what that was. But that, and I was very disappointed in myself that I did a poor job of documenting that sighting. And so I said, well, let's get into this, figure out how to document sightings, how to get it right. And our director at the time, Antonio Paris, had a lot of background in investigation. He'd been an investigator for the federal government, and he had after he left the Army, and so he understood investigative procedure and so on. So I said, well, this guy can teach me how to do investigations, and that's what happened. And we did a lot of investigations, and we had some really good cases. We had lots of bad cases. And I got out there and talked to those people. And what I learned was, no, they're by and large not crazy, not stupid, not ignorant, and perfectly functional, normal adults, many of whom are actually rather bright.
Yeah.
And
I know, it was surprising. To me as well.
Not the stereotype, right, of the ignorant hick who sees a light in the sky and thinks it's somebody from Mars, right? That's the majority of the people we talk to do not have a theory. They do not say, that was the gray man from Azadea Reticuli. They said, I saw something, I don't understand it. Can you help me understand it? And that was what we did. And in many cases, we were able to explain what they saw. And that's still the case. Most of the cases we get in, we're able to do enough investigation to make a positive identification of some known phenomenon.
Right. Which happens, like you say, most of the time. We're right at break right now, so we're going to head into break. So, hang in there with me. We'll still be talking on YouTube. So my guest tonight is Paul Carr, and when we come back, I'm going to be asking him about his close encounter. We need more information on that, and we'll continue talking about investigations that he's currently doing. And so hang in there, everyone. We'll be right back right after these messages.
We're clear, Martin. Sorry I didn't see your message there. I didn't have the chat window.
That's all right. How many minutes we have here?
1, 2, 3, 4 minutes and 15 seconds.
Got it. Okay. All right. So we are still live. We are live on YouTube. And so, Paul, we'll continue that conversation when we come back. Right now, I'm going to look to see if we have any questions. Anyone can post a question up in the chat room. And when you were here before, Paul, if I don't see any questions right now, I'm going to ask you, because I remember you said something that was pretty good. You said something along the lines is, we got to drain the swamp, the UFO swamp.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Well, that somebody else stole that since then, but I feel bad about it.
Some people are saying that the swamp is not drained, but the drain is swamped.
Or more gators got into the swamp.
We got to stay away from that topic. You should see the mail I get.
Yeah. Well, anyway, yeah. Well, as you know, and I'm sure many of your readers, listeners know, there's a lot of stuff in the UFO field that is highly inaccurate and highly speculative, and also just a lot of people who just like to fight. They're looking for a fight.
Yes.
And we don't want anything to do with any of that. We didn't. So some people might call it woo-woo. Saying, and so what we are trying to do is actually bring in a scientific approach. Now, I'm not saying science. Science is something we haven't arrived at yet. Science is a big deal, but we are we want to take a genuinely scientific approach, dogma-free. We don't think. Everybody at API has their own idea what UFOs probably are. I have my ideas too, but what we're really trying to get at the facts, create a database of well-investigated cases where we determine all the facts that we can, and try to figure out how to if it's even possible to do science within this field. We don't even know that it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's the fleeting element for one, transient element. There's, as far as you can't replicate, it's really tricky.
Well, but science has dealt with that problem before successfully. Scientists study very well tornadoes, earthquakes, gamma ray bursts, supernovas, things that only
good point.
Where the event is unique, but there are more events like it. And so what they do is they look for patterns in the multiple events, and they found, well, we can classify this and study that, and eventually models get built up, and they start to understand it better and better over the years. And some of them are just really, really difficult problems to solve. Like, how do you forecast a tornado more than, say, 5 minutes in advance? Very difficult.
Yeah, just to let you know, we got about 30 seconds, I think, before we go back on KGRA. Wow, you're right about that. And, I always mention, dark matter, and, I mean, that's non-observable, but it might be well studied.
Observable.
Yeah.
We'll find out someday, I think, what it is.
Yeah. Hey, Race, just interrupt when you have to.
You got it.
Yeah. So we're going back in like 10, 15 seconds, right? So when we go back, I'm going to, you can continue where you were, but I really want to know about your encounter.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that.
Yeah.
It bugs me every day.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Are we back? We're going back, Race?
I just got the bumper rolling. We're ready to go.
Okay, we're ready on this side.
In 5, 4, 3, 2.
All right, welcome back. This is Martin Willis. My guest tonight is Paul Carr. And right before the break, he was discussing his investigations for API. And but I do want to ask him, I want to ask you, Paul, about your encounter. Can you get into the details? And you just mentioned while we're on break here that it bothers you every day, and that's interesting to me. Well,
part of what bothers me is that I did such a poor job of documenting it at the time, which a lot of the things that I tell witnesses to do now that are good, I didn't do. Like make a sketch. I always tell witnesses, please, first thing, go grab a piece of paper and make a sketch of what you saw. Yeah. There's science that says that helps you remember it better. And also it helps us investigate better. So make the sketch. And probably before you even write anything down in words, just make a sketch. We've had some witnesses that have done beautifully at that, by the way, without being asked. So they're smarter than I am. But the thing, this was a nice warm summer day. I don't even know the date, but it was around 2007. And I was out in the front yard, and my kids and some neighbor kids and some neighbor adults were out there, and they were they were all standing on the driveway, and I was, for some reason, standing a ways away from them, towards almost on the street and not on the driveway, on the lawn. And my wife and the neighbor lady were in deep conversation. The kids were running around playing. And I just, this is broad daylight. And I looked up and I saw something that at first my brain did not register, because it was just, didn't make any sense. There was this black slab gliding through the trees in my next door neighbor's yard. And now I have to explain that between our yards there was a line of trees, including a great big white pine and some other oak trees and so forth. This part of Maryland is blessed with nice, beautiful trees everywhere. And we have, it was gliding in this, what looked like a straight path, but it was avoiding lots of things. It was avoiding my neighbor's house and several trees and eventually power lines. And it just glided. And it, at the closest approach, it was probably 50 feet from me. And
wow, that's very,
it
very
just kept,
close.
it was about the size of a car, roughly, but the flat side was facing me. And the texture looked very rough and uneven, but I couldn't see it great through the trees. I could just sort of see the big shape of it. And I looked at other people in the driveway and say, "What is that?" And nobody turned to look. It was the strangest thing. And the kids just kept playing, and my wife and they were deep in conversation, probably not even. And they sometimes I shout for no reason, and of course I shout at my kids all the time, so they didn't think anything of it. And it was just flying by in a direction that takes it roughly. We're in the Maryland suburbs of DC. It was, and if anybody wants to, I can give you the more details because we no longer live at that house. But it flew. It somehow avoided the power lines and the trees, and I had looked. I didn't see any broken branches or anything, and it just went, and it just glided gently.
No sound?
No sound at all. Again, about the size of a car, maybe 16 feet, roughly, give or take. But it was between. I know the things. I know it was behind, and I know it was in front of. So I know roughly how far away it was from me. Probably pretty well. So I sort of stared at it, and I thought, I got to run in the house to get my camera. I looked at the house, and I go, no, the house is 100 feet away. And by the time I find the camera and get back here, it was gone. I didn't have my cell phone, I didn't have my camera, I didn't have binoculars. So I just ran out to the curb. It had already gone past the curb and was flying, I don't know, maybe 30 miles an hour. And somehow it had turned. It was no longer, the flat part was no longer vertical, it was now horizontal. So I was looking at kind of like the back of a slab that was horizontally oriented. And it just, at a very steady altitude, just flew off. And until it was over, behind trees and houses, and I couldn't see it anymore. Again, there were lots of obstacles there, but it just went right through between them all.
Wow. Without
varying its course in any perceptible way. It was headed right towards DC. This, my emotional state was more frustration than anything else because I couldn't record it or anything. But I was also a little bit weirded out that nobody else noticed it.
Yeah.
They weren't really facing towards it like I was. So they might not have seen it, but. And this was, so ever since then, I've been on the lookout for rectangular shaped black things flying around. And we actually did get a case like that last year that I can talk about. But, and if any of your listeners have seen a black rectangle, I want to know, please go to report@ufo.org and let me know. But, excuse me, but that was, by far my closest encounter with anything. The other things I'd seen before were nocturnal lights, some of which I think may have been within maybe a quarter mile of me, but maybe it's hard to, it's impossible to gauge distance really in many circumstances. Just seemed like they were close. But others were much more distant. And I've seen a couple other weird things that might be explainable as unusual aircraft or weather phenomena, but that was definitely something that should not have been there. Was flying, was not an airplane, was not a little drone craft. It was big and it was black, and it was not aerodynamic looking, and so. That bugged me and bugged me. It still bugs me. I still think about it all the time, and now I worry that my memory's fading and I'm starting to get the details wrong.
Yeah.
And the story I'm telling you may not be exactly the same story that I would have told you 10 years ago. Yeah. But
I get that because the one sighting I had that I know was a sighting. I worry about that too. Like remembering it exactly right. Did you do anything after?
No, and until I was contacted a few years later, and I said, well, I can make amends for my my very poor documentation of this sighting by figuring out how to document sightings correctly and then helping other people do it. And that was one of my motivations for joining API. And I think we are doing a better job at that now of communicating to the public, although we have a long way to go, what to do when you see a UFO. And in order that your sighting will be properly recorded and again, like I said, the first thing you should do is make a sketch. Second thing to do, write down all the details, place, time, locations, color, whatever details are important to you. That's one thing one of my missions is to really educate the public about, first of all, about things that are flying around that are not UFOs, like the International Space Station or the planet Venus. We get that a lot. Balloons, all those things. We want the public to know about that so they can say, oh, I know what that is, rather than, calling us up and say, we are not alone. I saw this light in the sky.
Yeah.
When somebody says that, they said, I know we're not alone. I usually say, okay, yeah, they probably saw the B-2 bomber, or something like that. But
I think also that, to be fair, a lot of times people don't know how to react to something like that. And it kind of changes their thoughts and paradigm. But I do want to say the one thing you mentioned about the drawing first. I had Klaus Swan from Sweden on this show, and he was telling me about him and his wife having a sighting, and he actually said to her, don't talk, and they both went into separate rooms and immediately made a drawing. And I think
that's exactly the right thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. You should, if the other witnesses are not people get their contact information, but don't talk to them about what you just seen.
That's very hard. That must be very hard.
Well, I mean, you could say something like, I can't believe that. Yeah. What I just saw. Here's my phone number. Here's, just everybody get to report to UFO.org as soon as you can with your sketch, but don't stop talk about it. Because yes, your memories are affected by what other people's impressions were.
Yes.
And
there's
memory
studies about that. Yeah.
Memory is a delicate thing. And human memory is not, a recording device. It's various parts of our brains registering things that seem to be associated, and then we try to and our brains are extremely good at sort of reintegrating those into memories, but there's no guarantee that those will be accurate memories. So the best thing to do is make your sketch, write down all the details. You can do this in 2 minutes. It's not a big burden. And anything else that needs to be researched, we can do that for you, or we can help you do it. We can find out what planes were in the area, or if the space station was flying over, or that sort of thing. Yeah. So all you need to do is write down what your impressions were.
Just let's go over that right now if we can. So for some ideas, first of all, a sketch. Time, date, weather conditions, stuff like that.
Well, even the weather conditions, we can reproduce that from
time and date,
from official records.
Yeah.
Time and date, and location. If there's, and it might just be. You might know where you were. You might not know that well where you were if you were on the highway. If you've got a GPS receiver on your phone, just take a screen snap of your location using any of the many apps. Yep. Many apps are available. Or if you have a lot of people like me, I for cycling, I use an app that just tracks where I am. just turn that on, and the direction you were looking at is important. Some witnesses actually get that wrong. And of course, if you had photos or videos, don't mess with them. Save them off somewhere safe. Now then you can take a copy and mess with them all you want, but make sure there's a safe, unmolested copy that hasn't touched any software. And also, if you are taking a video or something with your phone, particularly, don't zoom.
Oh, really?
Well,
you do that afterwards?
No, you just never zoom. Well, I can zoom. Yeah, I can digitally zoom. See, cell phones, well, this is changing now, but cell phones do not have optical zoom. They have only digital zoom. That is, you can pinch but you're not really zooming. You're just using a smaller part of the image. And now cell phones are going to get optical zoom soon. But even if you have optical zoom, even if you have a really good camera, and I carry a mediocre camera with me everywhere, better than a cell phone, but not as good as my best camera. But don't zoom too much. And there's two reasons for that. One is autofocus, which you're probably using autofocus. Very few people are manual focus people. Is going to fail. The more you zoom in, the more likely you're just going to get a fuzzy blob. And second, the most important thing is you'll lose all your reference objects. You need to know what the object is behind, what's in front of, what relative size it is. And the reference object can be anything. It could be a tree. It could be a water tower. It could be the moon. Actually, the moon is the best reference object ever, if it happens to be visible in that direction. A building, a church steeple, anything. Because we can figure out later on how high the tree was, how high the church steeple was. We may even call the church and ask them how high their steeple is. We can. There's a and we can get use that information to tell how fast the object's moving, which is more important than what it actually looks like, and how if it's moving in some anomalous way, or light. And so, don't zoom. If you zoom, just zoom a little to maybe get some of the if you have an optical zoom, just to get maybe the light interference out of the frame. If you got a bright light or something.
Oh, I see.
Or the sun, if the sun's over there. But only if you have a real camera with a lens that can zoom. That is so crucial to getting good photo evidence. And one of the reasons we don't have very much good photo evidence is the cameras and cell phones have improved a lot, but they're still not very good. And they tend to be very wide angle lens.
They're good for close, like really close pictures of like your friends or yourself, selfies and stuff like that.
They're optimized for selfies.
Yeah, but when it comes to actually things at distance, like for instance, when I was living on my mountaintop, I tried to take these nice, I had these beautiful panoramic views, and I tried to take a picture of it, and it looked flat and looked like nothing. So,
yeah, well, I mean,
even
and the thing is, if don't go out and buy an expensive camera because you might see a UFO, because the reality, well, there are some good mid-range cameras that are really, really good that you might want to consider. They keep getting better every year, but if you have a really good high-end camera, you better spend some time learning how to use it, or you won't get good results.
Yes.
And get good lenses, and don't just go to the camera store and say, "What can I get for $5,000?" Because believe me, they will load you up. Yeah. They will not hesitate. Mm-hmm. But what you will get is something that's complicated, and if you're not willing to put in the time learning how to use it, you'll get even worse results. So if you want an everyday carry camera that is better than a cell phone, get a point and shoot. Mm-hmm. And there's some really good ones made by the top manufacturers that are, and you can buy a used one very inexpensively sometimes.
I mentioned this before. I was in the Boston Common and walking with my son, and a blimp was going over the trees, and you would think and I just wanted to take a picture of it. And you'd think that I could reach in my pocket, get my cell phone out, get the camera app out, and take a picture. The blimp, as slow as it was moving, I didn't have time to take the picture. So I can understand why, because a lot of skeptics will say, hey, there's so many cameras out there in everyone's pocket right now. Why aren't we getting really good UFO pictures? And I think part of that is, first of all, you got to think about you're looking at something that doesn't make any sense. Next, you're going to grab your camera, and then you got to open the camera app. And by the time you get it, a slow moving blimp got away from me. I can imagine a UFO, unless it's hovering or doing something unusual, would kind of escape a camera.
Right. Well, we always ask a witness, why didn't you take a picture?
Mm-hmm.
And we get a lot of different answers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they don't even take the picture. I mean, when they see, they don't even get their camera out in a lot of cases. A lot of times it's fear. They're so afraid that they can't be calm enough to operate a camera or operate their cell phone. And the other times it's just, I never thought to do that.
Yeah, I get that totally, because with my sighting, I didn't have a camera handy, but still, I really don't think I would have ever thought of taking a picture.
And my close encounter, my camera was 100 feet away,
Yeah.
and I was not going to go get it.
Yeah,
Because I was afraid of losing sight of it.
that's right.
So,
Yeah.
but now these days I have a point and shoot that I carry with me everywhere, that has 4x optical zoom, which is good enough, and it's also it's got a GPS receiver built into it, so
Really? Wow, that's nice.
I'll know where I was standing when I took the picture, no matter what.
Yeah.
And I found it, just today on the way home, I saw a helicopter fly over, and we get a lot of helicopters in that area. I thought, what if I get a picture? I grabbed my camera, turned it on. It turns on almost instantly. It turns on like in a second, and it was gone.
Yeah.
It took me 5 seconds maybe to get ready to shoot, and the chopper was gone. And so I actually practice that. I when I see an interesting plane or something, I will try to get a shot, just to prove out and be ready. But of course, this happens to a lot of people. They have a close encounter, and they never see anything ever again. But they're ready. They got binoculars. They got their camera. They got. I'm like that too.
Yeah.
I'm a total geek when it comes to that stuff. But so we try to help people be ready. But the reality is, you're probably just going to have your eyes and your brain. That's probably the equipment you're going to have.
Yeah.
And I have seen. We did get one photograph once, which is on our website at reportaufo.org. You go to that website, and I'll have to send you a link. It does not look very impressive.
Mm-hmm.
But there are foreground objects. There's clouds in the background. It's an overcast day, and we can look up and see what the cloud ceiling was in the weather archives. And you have this thing, and the witness said he saw it just right below the clouds. It looked like it was right below the clouds. And since we know how high the clouds were, we can figure out how high it was, and estimate how far away it was. Turns out it was very far away. It was miles away. And because we know exactly where he was standing, and we know where the houses are relative to him, we can measure quite accurately the angular size of the object, and then by guesstimating his distance, we can get roughly how big it was. About 100 meters.
Wow, that is about 300, about the size of a football field.
Size of a soccer pitch. Yeah. Now that's a rough estimate. It could be a little smaller or a lot bigger, depending how far away it really is. But since we know it wasn't above the clouds, we know how high the maximum height that it was. And if it was actually more below the clouds, that means it might have been further away. So the from that little photograph, the little it was shot with a Samsung Galaxy 6, a very ordinary sort of cell phone.
Yeah.
And it was I think one of the best UFO photographs I've ever seen.
Wow, how about that?
And I know it wasn't fake, and I know who took it, and I know I got it straight from him. So the chain of custody is established, and it was. We had a long conversation with the guy, and he saw it. His granddaughter saw it, and so there was a. That's the sort of thing where, you look at it, you go, that's just a little fleck up. It's like 30 pixels wide, but those 30 pixels are have critical information in them.
Yeah.
And also there's something like 3 or 4 photographs. So there's this is not a hoax. This is not a lens flare. I've had that argument before.
Yeah.
I know what a lens flare looks. I've seen a lot of lens flares. This isn't one. And it's and that kind of evidence was now that part of northern Maryland has had lots of odd things being seen in the sky. There's a lot of government activity up there, but none of it's really like aerospace development activity. It's Camp David. Camp David is in the area, that sort of thing.
Yeah, let's end it there. We got to go to break, and when we come back, I'd actually like to talk to you a little bit about this study of UFOs and your career. So hang in, everyone. We're going to be back in just a few minutes, right after these messages on YouTube. We'll be back in about 4 minutes. All right, welcome back. This is Martin Willis, and my guest this evening is Paul Carr. And we are talking UFOs and reporting UFOs and all that. Now, right before the break, you were discussing basically how one would report a UFO. And right now, I just want to ask you about your career in space, your engineer position and all that, and how does that fit with this little sideline that you're doing?
There is a wall of separation, a firewall between the two things, and it's. I'm sorry that that's necessary. It really shouldn't be, but it's if you want to be taken seriously in the professional world, you can't talk about UFOs very much. Even though I have something of a reputation as a skeptic, and we've debunked hoaxes. We have solved a lot of cases. I think we've helped a lot of people understand what happened to them. So, and I do not go around saying the aliens are here, or I'm very critical of some of the schools of thought surrounding that. But not that I think alien life doesn't exist or might not even be here. I think that's, and interestingly enough, there have been the new generation of scientists that are now starting to move into fields like astronomy and the new field of astrobiology are starting to take that a little more seriously. Mm-hmm. But their standards of evidence are necessarily very high. They are not going to be persuaded by anything that isn't just rock. And but back when Carl Sagan first coined the term exobiology, he got a lot of negativity for that from the scientific community. What are you talking about life on other planets for? That's not what real scientists do. We have no evidence of that. So let's move on. He stuck to his guns. He called it exobiology. It's now called astrobiology. And there's some very serious, very talented young people working in that field. Now, none of them are making any extravagant claims. Mm-hmm. They are studying the problems very hard about how life could originate and evolve on other worlds. And they're mostly focused on how life has originated and evolved on this world, and then try to project that out. And they look at Mars, they look at Titan, they look at other possible habitable locations. They look at exoplanets. It's real serious science. And that's a good example to us, but I think that you even have real scientists like Jason Wright trying to talk about there may have been an advanced civilization in this solar system a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
How do we look for evidence of that? How would we know if we saw something that was an artifact of this very distant civilization? Those are serious questions that are being raised. No one is claiming that they have anything like that. They're just saying, how do we know?
Yeah.
So it's a little more serious than it used to be. It's not quite as much ridicule from that direction. But I still think a lot of people see they see things. Well, I don't have to list the number of cases that have brought ridicule upon the community. And I'm sure you've been over them yourself many times. These things are, the UFO community has done as much to bring the laughter curtain down as anyone, else. And we have to recognize sometimes the skeptics are right about some cases, and not always. I think there's at least one case in my mind that I think the skeptics are wrong, but there are good examples of how not to bring the study of UFOs into respectable light. And like I said, I don't think we really have science yet. We have what I would call a proto-science,
Mm-hmm.
which is we are with UFOs where our ancestors were with electromagnetism 300 years ago.
Wow.
Didn't really understand it very well, right? Had a lot of wrong ideas about what it was, and didn't really even know how to study it. But they kept at it, and they eventually got to a very sophisticated theory, and a very correct theory. And that, it took several generations of just keeping at it. And that's, I think, where we are now. And so when I'm with NASA or Air Force people or even commercial customers, I do not bring up the topic at all. However, the skills I have learned in my career help me a lot of times with figuring out the answer to some of these mysteries, or just trying to determine the basic facts. I'm pretty good with sitting down and calculating things and figuring out ranges of parameters, where how far it could have been, how high it could have been, so that has taught me a great deal. Also, in engineering, you learn to look for hard facts, and you're not interested in promises. You're not interested in things that only exist on paper, unless there's some real data that says that they could be better than that. And so we tend to be on the skeptical side of things, which I don't think does anyone any harm.
I agree.
To ask hard questions of any claim that anyone makes, including other skeptics.
Mm-hmm.
Because the easiest person to fool is yourself, and that applies to everyone. Yeah. And there's motivated reasoning everywhere you look. So,
mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that answers your question or not. I mean,
yeah, it does. I just want to say to the listening audience, we're going to take calls in about 20 minutes from now. But I also wanted to mention that starting next week, I'm pretty excited about this. Through KGRA radio, they're going to have a phone system set up, and we're going to have phone screening and all that stuff. So calls will be a lot easier, and that's coming up starting next week, and I'll give out that phone number at that time. But just in about 20 minutes, we'll start phone conversations. So before we move on and talk about some of the cases that you've investigated, I just wanted to ask, going back to your work situation. Have there ever been any colleagues that ever brought up the subject first, or have you ever been close enough to actually talk about this subject to any of your colleagues?
I have heard people who I'm not close to mention it, but it has to be in a kind of half joking way, or you'll get.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
It's we're all kind of afraid to broach the subject. It's like, sex, religion, and UFOs. You don't talk about those things in a professional context.
Yeah.
For the same reason, I never ask anybody to believe in God. I don't want to. I don't want to stir that hornet's nest. Sometimes when you go out for beers afterwards, sometimes conversations range widely, but there's still, even after 3 or 4 beers, there's still some constraints.
Yep.
So it can. So the answer is no. Although, and in certain communities, if you bring up the topic of alien life, even just alien life, not even UFOs, you'll get the stink eye.
Yeah.
Because that's just not something we think about. Because let's look at it. If there were highly advanced civilization in our solar system operating now, it screws up a lot of people's budgets.
Wow, never thought of that. Yeah.
They have a lot going on, and they do not want to have to think about that. And so their worldview is that it's not an issue. It doesn't happen. And I have been there. I have been to that in that worldview. There was a time when I accepted that, and I know how they feel, and because as soon as you open the floodgates, it just it's anything could be true. And nobody likes that. You want to have a certain feeling of that you know your little world. Most scientists, most people don't want to realize that we're standing on a little island of knowledge in a vast sea of ignorance, and that's too scary. We don't think about that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into some of the cases. I know you said 2018. You've had some really interesting.
Yeah. Well,
cases.
Think about 2018. We normally get a lot of cases we can easily explain. 2018, that proportion dropped, and we had more cases that were unidentified, proportionally, and we had some. Now, unfortunately, a lot of these cases are single witness, maybe 2 witnesses. It's with a single witness case, there's always some doubt. In fact, a lot of doubt, because they could just be making it up, and you kind of have to go on actually speaking to the person and your sense of their credibility. But there's really very little scientific evidence that anybody can tell whether they're being lied to or not. I've heard something about the blue sense that cops know when they're being lied to, but the studies that have been done have shown that's not so clear cut. So, in fact, that the blue sense may not exist at all. And psychopaths can lie with a straight face and not give it away, right? But you think probably, when I talk to someone and they're very reasonable and they're very stable, and they show a great deal of interest in helping us do the investigation, that they are not hoaxing us. They could potentially be delusional or be massively misinterpreting something. But the first case I'd like to mention was investigated by Marcia Barnhart.
Can I just hold? We're getting people calling in now. We're going to take calls in about 15 minutes. So if you're trying to call in, please hold off. All right, go ahead, Marcia Barnhart.
Yeah, well, Marcia did the investigation of this case. but it was in Pennington, New Jersey, which is near where I used to live in Princeton. Yeah, it's in the west central part of New Jersey, near Trenton, and this is a kind of it's mostly semi-rural in that area, but this is kind of a built-up area that the guy was in, and he was walking to the store. It was a nice warm night, and he was walking about 10 o'clock, so just a little bit after dark, and he was walking on the street across the street from the store, and down in front of some office buildings and a private school, and there were some trees to his left, and then just beyond those trees, a large grassy area, maybe 100 feet long or something like that. And he looked up and he saw a very bright light, and thought, that's odd. And it came down, it started descending. And now this is something we see a lot. People initially report a bright light, and then when it gets closer, it's not a bright light anymore. It's something less bright. Something I've never really figured out why that is the case, but it came down, and he thought it was a sphere with lights around the ring, and it came quite close to him. It was in that little grassy area. He went through the trees to get a better look at it, and it came down, and then he saw that it was not a sphere, but more like two discs that were together, two discs of lights that were together, and one red disc and one green disc. I can't remember if the red or the green, but these two discs separated, and one sort of stayed back, and the other one started moving along this lawn in a kind of a swirling, like a search pattern almost. And it came within 20 feet of him, by his estimate.
Wow.
So this is a close encounter. And we know that because he said it was just inches off the ground and moving around. And then the two discs, then one disc kind of flew up a little bit higher, and the other disc came up and joined it, and then they flew off together, disappeared.
That's a crazy one. Wow.
And of course, he was enthralled. He wasn't terrified like some people report. He was enthralled, but he had to go to the store to get something. So he went to the store. He even saved his receipt, and he scanned it for us so we could see what time he was at the store and so forth. And got his stuff, and then came home and did a fantastic job writing up his sighting. He'd write several sketches, which are all available. We have the report on our website. This is case 2018-010-10, basically. So when I've been over and over that one in my head, what would that look like? It must have been so weird. And it's almost like some of the dreams I had when I was a child, of lights moving around, and just one beautiful disc of green lights, one beautiful disc of red lights, separating, and it separated, and they turned and went from vertical to horizontal, and I thought it was a great case. And the witness was one of the best witnesses we ever had. He was highly cooperative. Marcia couldn't get out there right away. She lives in Michigan, and this was in New Jersey, but she did get there about a month later, and met with him, went out to the site, and they took pictures and got an idea of where the event occurred. And it's now it isn't a glide path to the Trenton airport, but this sure doesn't sound like an he could have misinterpreted an airplane for this. There were power lines, big high voltage power lines just across the street. So this wouldn't have been a low-flying aircraft, because it would have been too dangerous to go through those power lines. And it was silent.
Yeah.
He said he heard a little sound when the two halves separated.
Wow.
But it wasn't a loud sound, and then no sound at all. And this is the frustrating thing. Marcia tried to find someone else who saw that.
Yeah.
And nobody else saw it. And it was only 10 o'clock at night. It's like, there should have been cars going by. It should have been people coming out of the store. The store was fairly far on the other side of the power line, but it was still just across the street. She talked to the manager of the store. Nobody said anything. She couldn't get anyone. And that happens so often, where you think somebody else should have seen this.
Yeah.
And no one's coming forward. So that was, I think,
that's a good one.
a great single witness case.
Yeah.
About as good as a single witness case can get.
Especially
we had
if
another
you're
one
saying, do you mind if we take this call, as this person is not
No.
going to stop here? So
Not at all.
Why don't we take
ahead.
this call?
Sure.
Caller, I'm finally, we're going to wait to take calls for another 10 minutes, but I see you're persistent. What's your first name? Where are you calling from?
My name's Stephen Padilla. I'm calling from Pahrump, Nevada.
Oh, out there in Art Bell country.
Pahrump, Nevada.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. How you doing? Welcome to the show. And what's your question for our guest?
My question's regarding disclosure to Paul. My question is regarding, do you think that the power be, whether it be the military, the government, deep state, don't disclose because that would be acknowledging the cattle mutilations and abductions, and that would assure that the public would be at risk of safety if they are acknowledging this?
Well, I think it's an excellent question, but although I'd have to defer to people like Chris O'Brien on cattle mutilations. I'm not an expert on that at all. I'm something of an abduction skeptic. There may be a core mystery there, but I think most of that is largely a modern myth. But the problem with disclosure is, since we don't know what it is they would disclose, we don't know why they won't disclose it. And in fact, when you say they, of course, the government's not a monolithic organization. And there are a lot of young people that come into the government every year and then spend some time there and then leave. And the UFO situation's been going on since at least World War II. So everybody that was on Project Grudge or Project Sign or up through the Robertson panel and beyond, they're dead. The generation that was in charge in the 1970s is dying off now. So does that knowledge get passed on? Does it get shared? Or just get filed away? Does it get destroyed? I don't know. There may not be anything. When we say the government, there may be no one in the government who knows what the government knows. And the other thing is, I don't know if you've seen the last scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
But the Ark gets put in a crate, right, and gets stored in a big warehouse where it's just got a number and a cryptic piece of paper that describes what it is, right? And then, so it's the best way to hide it is to put it, in a government warehouse. Nobody knows that. There might be one or two people who know, and then they'll be, 30, 40 years later, they're gone. So my feeling about disclosure is that we don't know if there's anything to disclose, and what there is to disclose may have nothing to do with abductions or cattle mutilations. I suspect the reason that the data are kept secret, and again, like as we were discussing earlier with the Navy, this could be like the raw data. There's lots of reasons. One is initially when the first data is collected, it's collected by systems that are classified, and so they can't release that. The second situation is that the data. No one wants to be the one the general that stands up there at the press conference and says the aliens are here, unless they have absolutely rock hard, solid case that they can make to the scientific community. If they can't do that, they're just going to get laughed out of the room. So, does anyone have that case put together? I doubt it. I doubt it. So there may be pieces of it that are known to some senior people in some areas. And John Alexander goes around telling everybody that there isn't anything like that. He's got more experience in the military than I do, but I don't. So I answer your question is I don't know why it's not disclosed. I don't know what is to be disclosed, but I doubt it has to do with actually public fear, and more with fear from the disclosure themselves. Am I going to be ridiculed for claiming something that I can't back up? And this is what when Corso came out a few years ago with his claims, he had zero evidence to back it up. Now, I don't know if his claims are true or false. I suspect they're false, but I don't really know that for a fact. But since he couldn't back it up, how do we, he'll never be taken seriously.
Yeah.
Now, he was retired and he didn't care, but somebody who's actually in the government right now is a senior position who would have to prove that is not going to prove it unless a team of scientists with a lot of funding get together and say, we've studied this for years and we think it's rock. We can prove it.
Yeah. All right, Stephen. Thank you for the call.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, we might as well go into opening up the lines. And again, next week we'll have a phone system. This week we're relying on Skype. So if you do call in, make sure you mute your listening device so that it doesn't feed back through the loop here. But before we get our next call, why don't you go into another interesting case? And
okay,
I might interrupt you with a call when it comes in. So
there was one in Waterfleet, New York last year. That this is what I mentioned earlier, that a guy saw a rectangular, roughly textured object. Again, when he first saw it, it was a bright light, and then he looked at his binoculars and he saw a sort of electric blue glow around it, but not the bright light.
Really? Wow.
And then he said it was like a dark thing, and it was. Now this one was tumbling, but he said the tumbling seemed to be controlled tumbling. It wasn't just randomly tumbling. And he gave us a sketch of it that he drew with like a Microsoft Paint or something like that. That has we got the pictures on our website. That's case 18013, I think. Again, another very good witness. And this was at 2 a.m. No, it was 1 o'clock a.m. And I think that it's not surprising nobody else saw it. Mm-hmm. And again, Marcia investigated that one, and she could not find any corroboration at all. And that's again, corroboration is really rare. I have a 2017 case, which is not highly strange, but a gentleman in the United Kingdom, in Cornwall, which is that spit of land that's on the sort of the southwest of England, he likes to take pictures of clouds, and so he was taking a time lapse of the clouds that were going by his house in Cornwall, and he noticed later that there were these two specks that were persistently in the same place in the frame. And well, the first thing I thought is, well, okay, the guy's got a problem with his camera. So, but he was great. I asked him, "Would you take some pictures on a gray card of your camera so I could see?"
Mm-hmm. Good idea.
And no, the specs weren't there. And he took a lot of other pictures, and the specs weren't there. They appeared, and he himself did a lot of analysis trying to say, well, are they going behind that cloud or are they in front of the cloud? Well, a cloud passed in front of them, so they're distant. And I looked at that closely, and I had to agree with him that the cloud was passing in front of them. I did a lot of work to try to figure out what direction he was looking in and so forth. I think he was initially mistaken about the direction, but I kind of got that fixed based upon the fact that I could see the houses in the frame, that I knew where the houses were and so on. But anyway, I looked at it, I said, it's very interesting, but there's two things that are stationary at a distance, aren't moving, and they're not doing anything unusual. I can't tell you what they are. I have no idea, but maybe the British Navy's up to something out there. I don't know. But the coolest thing was that about a year later, somebody contacted him with a very similar image that they had taken independently. Somebody who didn't know him. And so it confirmed that those two things were out there. Now, again, not highly strange, but, two objects. And now they were probably over the Irish Sea. But that's just a guess on my part. They might have been over land.
Wow.
And if they were, they could have been many miles away, and they would have been quite large.
Hey, Paul, we got a ton of people trying to call, and we actually have someone waiting right now.
Okay.
So we might as well take some calls. Caller, you're
Sure.
on the line. Your first name, where are you calling from?
Pat Noble.
Pat? Yeah, where are you calling from, Pat?
Yeah. North Carolina.
Hi there.
Oh.
You got a question for our guest?
Yeah, I had a sighting at a power plant, and you get ridiculed so much for talking about it. It's hard for people to report anything. I mean, I even called the control room for a witness, and they just laughed me off. But I thought it was pretty odd. It was like 2:30 in the morning, about the size of a school bus. Had a red, blue, and white light, and it just hovered for like 15, 20 minutes, and then it came down and below the tree line, and then hovered back up and blew off. But couldn't get anyone to come up and check it out with me.
Well, that's really
That's a lot of
interesting.
problem.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
who did you contact? Did you contact MUFON?
No, I haven't talked to anybody. You're the first person I've ever
Oh.
told, other than the guys I work with.
Well, we no longer have anybody in North Carolina, but that sounds like a really good case. Did anybody else see it?
It was strange. Sir?
Did anybody else see it besides yourself?
No, they wouldn't come up. They would not come up. I was working a night shift. It was like 2:30 in the morning.
Now, what kind of power
And,
plant is this? Is this a conventional or nuclear?
It's a conventional.
Well,
There's been other sightings at many of the plants around there. Some of the nuclear. And, yeah, it was really strange. But thank you anyway.
You can still report that to MUFON, or you can report it actually to Paul's site. Paul, give that address out.
just go to reportaufo.org. And it's a very simple form. Now, like I said, we don't know anybody in North Carolina, but we'd be happy to take your report and learn what we can from it.
Sure.
And make a sketch.
Yeah, it was about the size of a school bus. It was very interesting.
Well, the best ways to remember, keep your memories fresh, is to make a picture, draw a picture of it. And
oh yeah, I still get picked on about telling them about it.
yeah, well, I'm sorry that's the case, but we that's why we make our reports completely anonymous. That is, we never tell anybody the name or contact information of the person that made the report. Right. They can tell other people if they want to, but they won't get that information from us. And
yeah,
and
I will do that.
Okay, well, appreciate it.
All right, Pat.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the call, Pat.
All right, thank you.
All right, we have.
He's the sort of person I think. Just my first impression, he's sincere.
Yeah,
he really did see something. I don't know what it was, but he saw something.
All right, we have another caller just calling in right now. Call your first name and where are you calling from?
My name's Alan Dubois. I'm calling from Bristol, New Hampshire, and I wanted to know what Paul might have thought about the incident that happened at the aerial school in Africa back in the 1990s.
Well, I'm not an expert on that. I do know what you're talking about, but I'm going to have to defer to the experts. I haven't investigated it. I found that sometimes when I look at famous cases and I look hard at them, sometimes the evidence isn't as strong as has been presented by those who have a vested interest in presenting it. But I don't want to render a verdict because I'm afraid I just don't know enough about that case.
I can speak on it a little
All right,
bit.
I appreciate that.
Hang on, I can talk on it a little bit.
Okay.
We've had one of the witnesses on this show a couple of times. She's now in her 20s and lives in California, and very, very convincing, articulate, and also I'm a friend of Randy Nickerson, who's creating the film Aerial Phenomenon, which should be out. It's all done. He's just in looking for how to present the film. So that's coming out soon, and Randy will be on at some point with another witness to that case. To me, I think that's one of the most amazing, incredible cases with all those kids. What you're going to see in that Aerial Phenomenon movie coming out is them talking about it then and them talking about it now, how it's affected their lives. But anyway, I think it's a really good one. Thanks for the call from Bristol, New Hampshire, not too far as the crow flies from where I am right now. All right.
Yeah, I saw that. I appreciate your time, and like I said, I'm looking forward to that movie myself. So you have a great day now.
All right, you too. All right. So the line's open if anyone wants to call in. Otherwise, are you familiar with where we were before that last call? What we were talking about?
I think I just
the
finished
last
up
case.
on the New York case.
Yeah.
Which, again, another single witness case. I can talk about a double witness case that we investigated. We investigated last year, but it happened in 2017. Mm-hmm. And again, now this is a married couple. They had a child with them, but the child was asleep. And we generally don't interview children anyway, unless their parents really want the child to be interviewed. But this was a married couple, and they were out in a state park in Utah, not far from Salt Lake, and about 40 miles from the Dugway Proving Ground, so pretty far away from there. They were out there to see meteors. So they got out of their car, and this was a kind of a hilly area, but not too hilly. They could see pretty far. And they were there just to see a meteor shower, and the fellow had some binoculars with them, although that's not very useful for watching meteors, but and they saw this light come over the horizon. At first, they thought it was a plane, but then it came right over them, and they described it as roughly the size of a school bus. Now, of course, they didn't really know how far away it was because there's no way to. But we called it a close encounter because the wife actually thought it was even closer than that. She thought it might have been 100 feet away. The husband thought it was further. Neither one could be sure, of course. He looked at it through binoculars. It filled up the field of view of his binoculars. They said it was a soft blue glow. It stopped over them, silent. Now, this is where she started to get creeped out because it stopped over them. She thought it was, it's watching us. Whatever that is, it's paying attention to us. And then it flew from west to east. Flew away, and she was very creeped out. She did not want to know what was behind she thought something was behind the trees, and their child was in the car. So she said, "Let's get out of here." They didn't even. The meteor shower hadn't really even started to peak yet, but she, we're getting out of here, and they bolted, and we did get statements from both of them, and a good two in this case, but generally when the two people know each other really well, it's not quite as independent as you'd like. Mm-hmm. So, because they'll talk about it.
Sure.
Right? And not everybody's as smart as Klaus Fahn about how to handle that. Right. So, we did get a good statement, and it's good. And then, but again, the local people had not seen anything. There were no other people parked in that area that would have seen it. That's the grand prize if you can get multiple independent witnesses that describe something very similar. Mm-hmm. That is really what you're going for. corroboration is the key thing. And so I mention these cases partly because I'm hoping somebody else has seen something similar, even at the same time or at a different time, and they can tell us what they've seen, and they can go to report at UFO.org and give us a report. It will help us shore up that investigation.
Yeah.
We don't. We're a small organization. There's we just took on a trainee and she will be our fourth field investigator. We'll probably never grow to a very long. We don't want to be the next MUFON. Because I want to know every case that's going on. I figure that's 15 people tops. So if I can't know every case then we're too big. But we would like to ally with other organizations so that if we can't get boots on the ground somewhere, then they can, then that would be great. And vice versa, we could in some cases where they can't. And but they'd have to be an independent organization that had the same ethical policies that we do, or very similar ethical policies, because we're big on ethics. We're big on treating the witnesses' well-being as first priority. And we had a case last year where a young lady in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, saw a flying saucer, very classic flying saucer, very close to the ground on a public street, not out in the country, but in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and we could not get up there right away. It was only a month later that Marcia and her husband were able to visit Bethlehem and take video of the area. But I wanted to look for broken tree limbs. I wanted to look for damage to street signs, scuff marks, anything that might have indicated that this thing physically was there and disturbed something. And we couldn't find it. And a month is really too late. Yeah. And so I went on to the Reddit UFO forum and said, is anybody that can go? I'm not going to give you the witness contact information, but if you can go to this location, this exact location, and just look for anything unusual and take pictures, I would really appreciate it. And we had people say, yeah, I'm in Bethlehem, but I don't think I want to do that. I go, okay, take you 10 minutes, dude. Just go do it. Yeah. But no, I'm not a great persuader. So we really couldn't get. Now, we still don't know if what she saw was what she thinks she saw. She was still, she was within a block or so of it when she saw it, and she got terrified and made a sharp right turn and turned around. But she saw something. Yeah. But the police didn't have any calls. One of the first things you do is you contact the local authorities and say, did you get calls? Did you have anyone, alarms go off or anything like that? No, nothing. Mm-hmm. If I had been there the next day, I would have knocked on some of the doors of the people who live right around there and said, do you have a camera, a doorbell camera? Oh, was it on last night? Can I, and if you do, can I please, here's a clean new SD card. I'll trade it for the one you got in your camera. But we didn't, by that time, anybody who had a doorbell and this was like 3 o'clock in the morning, so people wouldn't have been up, So that case, again, another single witness case where we don't have enough information, and maybe it could have had some information.
Yeah. No. So why would? Let me just ask you this question, and I'm not looking for you to bash or anything like that, but what is the advantage of contacting API over, say, MUFON or Peter Davenport's, phone line there?
Well, I have no problem with people contacting any other organization And maybe that organization will investigate, maybe they won't. Maybe they'll send out a good investigator, maybe they won't. Only thing I can say to you is that if you contact API, we have a very, very strict ethical policy. We'll maintain your anonymity and privacy. We have, and by the way, our training material is all available to anyone. Creative Commons, we don't charge it. I don't know how much they charge now. Move on for the book training material, but it's like $100, I think. When I bought mine, it was like $30, but all this art stuff is Creative Commons. It's available. You can ask for anything. I'll provide it to you. If you can't find it on our website, I'll dig it up and give it to you. And one of the first videos we put up there was ethical training. So we're strong on that. The other thing is we are very good investigators, and we don't have any weak investigators. They don't last long in an organization because we will give you a report when you are done. If you want to see the report, we'll give you our full report. And if we think we have identified what you saw, we'll give you the argument why we think that, and we'll also express our uncertainties. We'll say, well, it could have been this or that, and maybe not. And so, and we're not trying to prove anything. We're not trying to prove that aliens exist or that they don't. We're just trying to get to the facts about your case and make reasonable inferences from those facts. And we think that's what's valuable, because we don't think there's ever going to be a smoking gun UFO case that says, aha, proof of X theory, whatever that theory is. What we do think is the patterns of the cases may reveal something that would suggest a direction to go and research. And it's not all going to be field investigation. There'll be other types of research, like automated surveillance cameras or other types, instrumented research. So that kind of thing is but like I said, we're not really a science yet. We need to collect accurate data as carefully as we can and make it available to the community. What we do is we take all our reports now, we redact them of any of identifying information, and we put them on our website. And so that's available. And I've talked to Chris Cogswell and other people who are looking for that kind of information, and we're going to work with him and other people to see how we can make that information more useful. Now, I don't want to be in the same organization with Chris. I don't want him to be my boss, or I don't want to be his boss. I want us to work together in a cooperative effort. Yeah. And
Chris is a good guy. Yeah, I like Chris.
He is. I'm a fan of his, and I enjoy his podcast.
Yeah, he's funny.
I've talked to Kevin Knuth last year, and he's got some stuff he's working on. And now I'm not going to help him with this stuff, but I can maybe help understand the patterns of what we're seeing. And this is a long-term project. It's not going to happen overnight.
Right. Just a couple of things here. First of all, we have about 7 minutes left or so to the show. I can't believe how fast it's gone. You mentioned 2 times tonight, you mentioned someone seeing a UFO with a soft blue glow. And that's funny, the people that have heard me tell my story a number of times, that's what I saw. I saw a perfect disc with like a light blue glow, which is interesting. But I want to talk, earlier on we were talking about memory and how, you can lose memory, or it seems to change. And I agree that is something that has happened. I've been dead certain about something and have been totally wrong. For instance, I thought I lived in a log cabin years ago and ended up it was a house with natural sighting. It was so I can be wrong in memory, and I understand that.
Sure.
So I guess the question I have for you is, what is your thoughts on when people do regressive, hypnotism? What do you think about that?
Well, from my understanding of the science, and there's also a history there, not just UFOs, but other things, that memory regression therapies of all kinds, including hypnotism, are extremely unreliable. So, sometimes memories may be retrieved, but those memories there's a high probability those memories are false memories, which is a real thing. False memories, as you've just explained, happen all the time. They are not people lying. They're not people being deceptive. They are just people. That's just the way human memory can fail. And there's a lot of research that shows how false memories can be injected. And just outgoing, setting aside the whole alien abduction thing for now, which I, like Jacques Vallée and others, I question the ethics of using memory regression with UFO cases. But look at the satanic panic back in the 80s. A lot of those people had memory regression therapy, and they remembered the satanic ritual abuse. Families were torn apart. People went to jail who were innocent. A lot of things, really bad stuff happened because of the memory regression therapies. Now, if you talk to any serious psychologist, and I've talked to psychologists every chance I get about these kinds of things, they'll tell you that is pseudoscience. It's not real. The risks are extremely high of someone remembering something very traumatic that never happened.
Really?
Wow. And
do you know, on this line, do you think it's because they're led along, or like someone's unprofessional and leading them?
I think that it's really, really difficult to avoid leading questions. But even just, when I'm dealing with someone who's normal memories, I struggle with not asking leading questions. But my sense of it is, and again, I'm not a psychologist, but it's not just that. It's not just that they're asking leading questions. It's just people become highly suggestible state. In this highly suggestible state, just their own fantasies can trigger memories. But yes, I think a lot of very unethical so-called therapists have deliberately, maybe insidiously led them down the path towards the conclusion they want them to reach. Because then they'll need more therapy. They'll need more. They can bill them more, and it's because some states you can hang up a shingle and call yourself hypnotherapist without any training, really, or very minimal training, and I would not even go to a PhD psychologist for memory regression because I'm really afraid my memories would be false and possibly traumatic. I mean, I had things from my childhood I thought were really interesting memories, but I do not want to find out that way. I just don't think it'll work. It's explicitly in our ethical policies. We do not recommend hypnotic regression. We don't do it. It's not just because we're not qualified. We don't think anyone should do it. Now, if the science comes out that says that there is a way to retrieve memories that are somehow repressed or screened off, and good science is done that way, then it might become more ethical to do that. But I'd only do it with someone who's really, really well trained and really, really knowledgeable, and somebody that has a graduate degree and like a psychiatrist or psychologist. Now, back in the 60s when Betty and Barney Hill got regressed, they didn't know better. I mean, the guy was probably a legit psychiatrist, but he didn't really know not to hypnotize them. The science just wasn't there. And there's a long history of psychiatrists doing things that aren't supported by science. So.
Wow. So that's interesting. We only have about a minute here. And when the one thing you just mentioned is when someone is suppressing, and that's the one case where I would think if it's suppression due to something really traumatic, which people can do, they can suppress those memories. I would think that would be a case where regression may help them at least get over suppressing the memories. But
I don't understand how that works, and I'm not sure anybody does. I certainly think people
letting
who have
guard down. I think that's what I'm thinking. But
people who've been in, say, combat, or police officers who've been in shootings probably do need therapy. but I think they need to be in the hands of a real pro who, and it's not so much retrieving their memories that's important. It's what's important is getting them better.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Hey, this is the end of our show already. I can't believe it. Paul, it's been wonderful. Thank you, and I'm so glad you came back to the show. And throw out your website, if you would, real quickly.
Reportaufo.org.
All right, excellent.
Everything's there that you need to know.
All right, great. Thanks so much, and have a good night.
Well, it's been great, Martin. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, everyone, so that's it for our show. Thank you so much for listening. We will be back. I think we'll be back next week. Our guest next week just had to cancel, so I'm scrambling looking for a guest coming up this week. But I do appreciate you listening, and I also appreciate the people that support the show. And I also want to thank Peggy for handling the Facebook page. You can check that out for UFO News Daily. Remember to go to podcastufo.com, check out the blog, UFO sightings, etc. All right, thanks so much, and remember to keep your eyes to the sky.